Welcome back to BBN After Dark. We have our position previews for 2024 continuing here today with the second base preview. And if you missed it last week, we talked about our first baseman. First base was a position that is very top heavy and then kind of, have a lot of guys in the middle of the tier. Second base, I think, is a little more even throughout. We got a couple superstars we're going to talk about today, but I think there's a lot of names here that are definitely, solid players with some upside. There's a lot of guys who are maybe future prospects that maybe 2024 is not their year, but next year or the year after, we could see them being top team impact players. But this is definitely an interesting position, and I'm excited to jump right into it. And let's go ahead and start with the superstars. So again, if you missed our previous two position previews, we basically are breaking these players into four tiers. We have the superstars, which are the best of the best top players in the Bears. We have the veterans, who are guys who are already on the top teams, probably a starter on the top team, guys who are established. You have your depth, which is guys who are either on the second team or maybe on the top team bench or, projected to be on the top team this year but haven't made there yet. And then there's the up-and-comers, who are some of our top prospects and maybe some rookies as well. So let's go ahead and jump right into it with the superstars. I've got three names at this position who I think really stand out above the rest. And in those three names, I think there's definitely one name who is by far the best second baseman in the Bears right now, and that's Jack Dalton. I think you could make an argument this guy is a top 3 player in the entire Bears. I think nobody can say he's not a top 10 player for sure, but at least for me, I think he's a top 3 player. I mean, this guy, you look at the numbers he put up last year between he played 14U in the summer and then 16U in the fall, and just was a monster. Hit 555, an OPS plus over 140, an extra base hit percentage over 20%, and a strikeout rate under 10%. Only 3 players in the Bears had those kind of numbers. And this guy's just a beast. I mean, really no weakness in his game. He can pitch, he can hit, he can play defense, he can, he really does it all. He can hit for power, he can hit for average. This guy's the complete package. And KJ, I want to start with you with this guy. I mean, the monster year he had. I think we all knew Jack kind of had it in him to be that superstar type player. But I think this is the best Jack Dalton we've seen ever in his career. KJ, give me your thoughts on Jack Dalton's 2023.
Yeah, if there are any questions if Jack, was one of the best players in the Bears, he answered them this past season. I mean, every level this guy's gone to, he is dominated at, and I think he is one of the best players in the Bears, not just second baseman, and he's only getting better. I mean, this guy's only getting stronger. He's got good metrics to go with it in the weight room. He's got good metrics in the HitTrax cage. He throws hard. He's just an all-around superstar.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you talk about superstars, it's Jack Dalton. I mean, he's one of the best players in the entire Bears. And going into 2024, I mean, obviously he's going to start for that Dalton team either at second, potentially even maybe at third, and potentially even in the outfield. I mean, he's got several different options. I know he's poised to probably start for the varsity Lutheran South team this spring, and I think we're going to see big things from Jack Dalton all year in 2024. Let's go and move on to our other two superstars, starting with Owen Lewis, who I think for a lot of people kind of came out of nowhere last year. I mean, he's always been a solid player since he joined the Bears, but I think last year, he really kind of upped his game to a point that it had never been before. A career high extra base hit percentage up above 16%, 19 doubles, 3 home runs. I mean, this guy really was I think in previous parts of his career, you saw him more as a high batting average, not a lot of power. I think we kind of saw the emergence of some power from Owen Lewis in the last season. This guy's always really good defensively. I put him in the second base preview, but he could certainly play short or, even catch as well. So I think this guy definitely kind of solidified himself in that superstar tier this year. And Bernie, I want to go to you on this one. I mean, Owen, I would say I've always been a big Owen Lewis fan since he joined. Obviously, when I was running that age, I thought very highly of Owen, especially once I saw what he was able to give me in the games. But I think even I was surprised by what we got from him last year. So, Bernie, just talking about Owen's 2023, were you surprised in the kind of production he put up? And what do you think about Owen's 2024 season?
Yeah, I think, over the course of the past, since I took over the team, really, Owen was kind of thought of as leadoff hitter that is going to get on base and put the ball in play. He's not going to strike out very often. but he's not going to do anything crazy at the plate, right? So he's just going to give you good at bats. But like you said, his extra base hit rate was through the roof this year. Career high for him. He had a very good year, and like some of these balls he hit, right, they weren't just doubles because he's hitting line drives in the gap. They were doubles because they one hopped big fields. So I think the sky's the limit for this kid. I think he's gonna have another great season. He's gonna play a little second for us. I think that he's gonna catch a little bit. And I've said this before with my guys, the shortstop position is wide open right now. It's a wide open competition. So I think he could play some there for me. And obviously he's going to be pitching a lot this year still.
Yeah, I mean, this guy, definitely not quite the level of Jack Dalton yet. But I think when you talk about a guy who can really do it all in the baseball field, Owen Lewis is that guy. I mean, good on the bases, good in the field, anywhere you put him. I know you said this plenty of times on the show before, Bernie, but he might be the best fielding pitcher you've ever seen. I mean, this guy, you look at his numbers the last 2 years, his strikeout rate and walk rate were basically the same from 2022 to 2023. So he didn't strike out more, he didn't walk more. Those stayed the same, and his extra base hit rate more than doubled from the previous year. I mean, this guy I think has all the makings of a guy who could be emerging as a top. I would say last year he probably was a top 20 player in the Bears. I think you could debate whether talent-wise, he's a top 20 player, but I think he definitely had a top 20 season. And I think he's got a chance this year to really prove that he is that caliber of a player. I think sometimes he gets overshadowed by Harrison, but I think there were times last season where he was kind of going tit for tat with Harrison over the course of the year in terms of the best player on that team. And I definitely think when you take into everything he does, I think there's an argument to be made that he was one of the most valuable players in the entire Bears. So a monster 2023, like you said, Bernie, going into 2024, he's going to hit somewhere in the top 4. He's going to play somewhere in the middle of the diamond. And I think he's going to be a really impactful player for that Burnsville team that looks to continue to improve on the last 2 years. They've improved. And then the final player in our superstar tier, another guy who, again, kind of came out of nowhere for, I think, everybody. I mean, I know a lot of us liked him preseason, but I definitely don't think anybody, except maybe KJ, saw this kind of breakout coming. And that, of course, is Weston Brody. This guy was playing on arguably the best team in the Bears, had an OPS plus over 110, hit 458 with an extra base hit percentage at 13%. I mean, this guy was a beast, had some monster home runs on big fields as well. Definitely a guy who has more power than kind of you would think from his body. And this guy's just a gamer, great defensively, good on the bases, and really can do it all at the plate. KJ, I do want to start with you on this one. What was it about West that kind of pictured him as a breakout for you going into last season? And what did you think of when it's all said and done, looking back on the year? What did you think of West's 2023?
Yeah, I think Wes had a monster year. When Wes came to the Bears, he's really, he was pretty scrawny. And the guy just continued to get stronger in the weight room. And once he got stronger in the weight room, he still, we still didn't see the velocity and the exit velocity going up. And so, we don't like to throw around mechanics and stuff in the Bears. We don't, but we went through some really simple, ways to increase his velocity. And Wes bought fully into to what I was saying, and we worked together in free swing for a long time, and his velo just shot up crazily. And you always have those guys who, it takes a couple. You always have guys at the bottom team, and you call them on top team, and they adjust so quickly, they develop so quickly. You guys have who develop, in season span, and it seemed like Wes, developed within weeks. I mean, of him buying into our approach that we were having him do. But just getting higher exit velocity. It started in the hit tracks cage, and obviously the numbers came on the field. And like you said, they weren't very surprising to me because I saw what he was doing in the cage beforehand.
Yeah, and I was talking about Owen Lewis, a guy whose extra base hit rate doubled from the last year to this one. Weston Brody's quadrupled. I mean, he went from a guy who hit one extra base hit in 2022 to a guy who, again, had in terms of second base, one of the best extra base hit rates in the entire Bears. And this guy, I think, at least for me, I always believed in Wes. I thought 2024 was going to be his year to really take over. So I think this breakout last year. Kind of happened a year early for me, but it kind of leads me to wonder, what more does he have in the tank? Is this the best Wes we're going to see, or could he even get to that Jack Dalton level? And Bernie, I actually want to throw this to you. I know you haven't been around too much of the BWL season, but to me, I think Wes took even a further step forward this winter. What do you think is kind of the ceiling for Wes? Do you see a Jack Dalton type profile, or what do you think is the ceiling for Wes as we talk about 2024 and even beyond?
Yeah, like you said, I've not been in much of the BWL for his league, but um, if you're just looking at the type of player Wes is and how he's grown over the past year, if you want to kind of compare him to Jack Dalton, I think that he's still gonna strike out a little more. I think that Wes still has that in him a little bit, but I think that could come with a slight extra base hit rate than we've seen from Jack Dalton, and that's saying a lot because Jack Dalton's extra base hit rate is very up there. So similar, but I think you get some more strikeouts, but you'll get some more extra base hits with Wes, at his ceiling.
Yeah, definitely. I do kind of agree, Bernie, that he's got more of that, you know, high power, high strikeout. He definitely strikes out more than Jack does right now. But I could see that number potentially going down as he gets better and better. I know in the BWL, he very rarely struck out, and obviously he's facing some top arms. So I think Wes could be a future MVP candidate. I know at times this year we were talking about him, especially like in the monthly awards, we were talking about him as an MVP candidate. So I think he's definitely got that in him. So a perennial all-star, I think, but I think he's got even that MVP caliber upside going forward. Let's go ahead and move into the veterans category. And this category is really interesting because you got some guys who had a down year in 2022 and then really had a good year last year. You got some guys who had a good 2022 and had a down year last year. How are they going to bounce back? So this is a really interesting category for me. And let's go ahead and start actually at the top with the older guys. I'm going to start with Brady Heck, a guy who I think kind of for a little while was known definitely more for his pitching. But if you look at the end of last year, I mean, this guy was really hitting well. I know he ended up hitting a home run over the fence for the first time in his life. He had several extra base hits for that team, and I think really kind of established himself as a, middle of the order bat for that 18U Floyd team that was looking for guys to step up. And I think this guy's had a really good winter. Bernie, I want to start with you with Brady, and this is a guy I feel like you've always liked, maybe not necessarily for the bat, but just the type of kid he was, his pitching. What did you think about Brady's offensive year in 2023, and how do you see kind of his offensive profile taking him into 2024?
Yeah, obviously, I think last year was very impressive for Brady Heck. Honestly, I think he's kind of like when I took over that my current 12U team, I think he kind of profiled out the same type of hitter as Owen Lewis. Like he was a contact guy who didn't strike out very often. He was going to take good at bats. He wasn't hit very many extra base hits, and I think that as he's been here longer and longer, he's gotten bigger and stronger. And I think we saw a jump last year with him, his first career home run. I think that he's gonna have a chance to join 18 Floyd, do the same type of thing, and put up a good season.
Yeah, and definitely, I don't think you can doubt the work ethic. I mean, this guy, I think you definitely could doubt the work ethic back in, 2021, even maybe early 2022. You could kind of, say, is this guy really pushing everything he's got? I know that was a criticism of mine for Brady Heck when he first joined the Bears, that I felt like he wasn't really giving it everything he had. And I think over the last couple of years, he's really kind of stepped that up. He's always been a guy with really good plate discipline. He walks more than he strikes out, which is, a good quality to have. And now if he's going to add power to that, I think he could be a really formidable force for that lineup. I want to go to another high school guy here, a guy who I think has always kind of been under the radar since he joined the Bears. But if you talk to his teammates and you talk to his coaches, he's a very valued member of that team. And that's Brody Kveton, who, when you look at the offensive numbers, they're definitely not flashy. I mean, he does not hit for a ton of power. His average is just going to be kind of middle of the road, especially for the team he's on. But I think when you take into account the entire package of what he brings, good defense, good pitching, especially out of the bullpen, and definitely a good presence on the team, I think Brody Kveton's definitely more valuable than the stat sheet shows, and we've talked about that a lot. KJ, I know you've gotten a chance to coach this guy in the past, and I know, he's been a guy who's kind of consistently been in free swing. What do you think about Brody Kveton's 2023 from an impact standpoint on that Dalton squad? And what do you think you can see from him out of 2024?
Yeah, like you said, Brody is very valuable to the team, and it's hard to see unless if you only look at the obviously, like you said, the game changer stats. This guy he is a leader on that Dalton team. The guys rally around him. He's a guy who gets the whole dugout going. I've never seen Brody get down. I mean, he's a constant high energy guy in that dugout, which is very valuable. And he's a very solid player. I know I had him last year in the BWL. He all the time came up with some big clutch hits. He throws strikes on the mound. He plays a pretty good second base as well. And so, do I think he's going to take huge steps, this next season? I wouldn't say that, but I think what you're going to get out of Brody. You're going to get that high energy guy. You're going to get a guy who does his job. And, a Dalton team, they don't need another superstar, but you can never get enough of Brody Kvetins.
Yeah, and I think you said it great there, KJ. This Dalton team's got so many superstars that not everybody can be that guy. Not everybody can have the ball, as some people say. And I think Brody is a very good role player for this team. I think if you're Ike or even if you're some of the players, you wouldn't take Brody off the team, even if it meant maybe getting a little bit of a better player, because they're not going to fill Brody's role as well as Brody does. He's a good kid, and I think he definitely is valuable to this Dalton team. Moving into another guy who I think had a really interesting season, that's Andrew Engelken. Bernie, I definitely want to go to you on this one because I think you're going to be able to speak to his 2023 better than anybody. Andrew, I think, arguably had the best season of his career in the summer, where he was really dominating on that 16U Burnsville team. And then in the fall with 18U, he had maybe one of the worst seasons of his career. He really struggled to kind of find a consistent role. He struggled to really hit consistently. And it just seemed like we saw two different versions of Andrew Engelken. So Bernie, first of all, I want you to tell me about Andrew Summer that he had with your team. I know he was a leader for that team. He really was one of the best hitters and best pitchers on the team. And then kind of speak to what kind of went wrong from in the fall, and what do you see Andrew Summer looking like going into 2024?
Yeah, the past summer on my 6U squad, he was obviously one of our best bats. He always batted 2 or 3 for me in the lineup. I think that was a big confidence boost for him. I think that when he came down to play, kind of his rightful age, he knew he was the guy, he expected to be the guy, and that's why he found a lot of success. And I think going back to this fall, going back to his age again, or going back to his grade type thing, back up to 18U, there was not a clear spot for him. And I think that maybe his confidence started wavering. He struggled the first couple of weeks, and I think that weighed on him the rest of the fall. But I think this guy took his opportunity in the summer and ran with it. I think that if he can do that same type of thing, he will earn his his rightful spot on the 18 Floyd team.
Yeah, and I think he's a guy who definitely has earned the spot on the roster. And I think the question is, what kind of at-bats can he earn for himself? I mean, he's obviously in a competition with several different guys to round out that infield. There's several different formations that you could see that 18 Floyd infield taking shape. But I think Andrew Engel can definitely, is in the fight for sure for at-bats. And I think in terms of ceiling, I think it's hard to argue Andrew doesn't have the third or fourth highest ceiling of the infielders on that team. But I think the floor is the question mark for him, because I think we kind of saw how bad it can get for Andrew last fall. He really struggled. But I think he's definitely got a high ceiling, and he has a lot of power in him. I mean, he's another one of those guys that hits for more power than you would think, just by looking at his body. So I like Andrew a lot, obviously. I mean, he's one of my good friends outside of baseball. I like him a lot as a kid, and I'm hopeful he can really put together a good season here. I'm excited what he's going to do both in the spring and hopefully in the summer as well. Moving on to another guy who I think had an up and down 2023 season with the bat, and that's Cam Bernstein. This guy is always kind of profiled as a high ceiling, low floor kind of guy, but I feel like, and maybe this is me more so looking at the stats, and KJ, you're going to be able to speak to this a lot more dealing with him every single day, but it feels like Cam really wasn't that type of player this year. It didn't feel like he had those high highs and low lows like he's had in previous years. It felt like he was pretty even keel throughout the entire year. He never really was taking over, but he also was never, he was never a liability in the lineup. He was always kind of just solid. And again, maybe this is me just looking at the overall stats and saying that. And KJ, maybe you have a different perspective. But for me, I feel like Cam kind of settled into just a solid player this year, and he didn't really hit his ceiling, but he also didn't hit his floor. So, what did you think about Cam's 2023, KJ, and what do you think about him going into 2024 with the bat?
Yeah, I think 2023, we didn't get that superstar version of Cam, and like you said, we didn't get that really bad Cam either. But a guy who hovered around the mid to bottom of the order. Cam's the only guy, and I've coached Cam for I guess since 10U, and Cam. I always say that Cam's a guy who has been at every facet of a lineup. He's been the superstar of a team. He's been one of the worst players of a team. He's been the one hitter on a team. He's been the last hitter on the team. He's probably played in, every position on the field for me and batted in every single spot in the lineup for me. He came off the bench. He's been a guy who starts every game. He's been a guy who starts the championship game. He's been a guy who never pitches. So, Cam has never really been a consistent guy. I think this off season he did a lot of good things with the bats, which is something I think at the end of the fall we really saw his pitching come to life. And his pitching was very consistent last fall. I mean, he was good almost every single outing. We've seen him kind of buy into playing second base again, which is a newer position from him from previous season. But really, the bat I think has gotten much more consistent this offseason. It looks like he's hitting for more power. He played really well in the BWL with the bat off really good pitchers. So, but I have big hopes for Cam in our offense coming up this season. I think he's going to be in that 4, 5, 6 spot. And he's a guy you can rely on, and we don't have time for Cam, to be inconsistent. He's going to have to adjust right away to being one of those big time players again. And but I think he's ready for it this coming season.
KJ, I was just looking at Cam's kind of career page, and I did want to ask you, I don't know if, you kind of felt this throughout the season, but the big thing that kind of jumps out when you look at his stats from last year is his walk rate. His career walk rate is typically around 19%. Last year, it was down at 10%, so it almost split in half. To me, that kind of sounds like maybe he was and you can almost never say this about a player, but maybe he was being a little too aggressive where he wasn't necessarily getting a good pitch to hit. And that's why you saw that kind of more middle of the road type season for him. But I just, it's kind of stood out to me. Did you feel that during the season? Did you feel that more aggressiveness or what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think he definitely got more aggressive. But I thought he was too passive in the past. I mean, I remember I think in our 11U season, he led the team in strikeouts and he led the team in walks, which like you always say on the show, it shows that he's being passive. And I don't have the real numbers, excluding 10U, which is guys are going to have big offensive seasons. I think this past season, his extra base hits went up, and his walks went down. I think the strikeouts went down as well. At least the strikeouts looking for sure. So I think being too aggressive is much better than being too passive. And so I think we'll find that happy medium this season for Cam.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Again, very rarely I say, being too aggressive is as a negative thing, but I do think that there are some guys, and actually a guy that I want to talk about next, who sometimes being too aggressive kind of limits your power because you're not letting when you just swing at the first pitch every single time, you're not letting yourself get a good pitch to hit. And, maybe that was the thing for Cam, maybe it wasn't, but a guy who I've definitely said that about before is Evan Lancaster. He's a guy who, again, in my coaching career, I've been coaching since 2016. So I mean, this is going to be my 8th year coaching. I've never had a player that I really criticized for being too aggressive until this, past year with Evan Lancaster, that I just felt like he wasn't putting himself in the best situation to hit for power. He kind of struggled in April and May, decided to go down to Bell and really just dominate for 2 months. I mean, he was one of the best hitters on the planet for 2 months on Bell, just raking, and then came back to Floyd and was a much improved player in the fall, hit for way more power than he ever had going into the fall season. I mean, I can look here in a second. Well, I want to ask you about Evan Lancaster, Bernie, and I'll look here in a second. But I have to think that was by far his best extra base hit rate of his career. I mean, he was hitting for absolute bombs. He hit several over the fence home runs. I mean, I feel like this is kind of a cheap comparison to make, But he did look like Ian Lancaster in his prime, where he was just hitting absolute nukes. And the strikeout rate went up a little bit, but Evan very rarely strikes out as a get. So his strikeout rate going from like 9% to 11%, who cares, if he's going to raise his extra base hit rate so much. Bernie, I know this is a player you've always really advocated for. What do you think about Evans 2023? Because I think we saw 3 different versions of him. We saw the one that struggled at the beginning of the season. We saw the dominant player on the second team, and then we saw a very good role player on the top team in the fall. What do you think of Evans 2023, Bernie, and where do you think that leaves him for 2024?
Yeah, I think that, going into 2024, actually, first we'll talk about 2023 a little bit. I think that, really just went down to Bell and got a lot of confidence. There was once upon a time where he was the superstar of the Floyd team. And I think he kind of lost that mojo over the past, year and a half, 2 years or so. I think he got it back though with Bell. I know foreshadowing, we'll talk about him a little bit more later in the show, but I'm all aboard with the Evan Trainer 2024. I think that he's gonna have a chance again to be one of the top players, and I think that he can be this year.
Yeah, and Bernie, you kind of alluded to it. And I will say some of these stats are a little bit inflated because of that time on the second team where maybe the competition wasn't quite as high. But Evan Lancaster this year had a career high extra base hit rate, career low strikeout rate, um, career high walk rate, career high doubles, career high OBP, career high slug, career high home runs. I mean, this guy set a career year. And like you said, Bernie, he was a very good player in the past. I think he's got potential. I think his potential is even higher than it's ever been. I think he could be a superstar. And again, like you said, Bernie, we're going to talk about him later, but I think his BWL season, he's been one of the biggest risers from the BWL season. I think amongst everybody. So I'm excited for Evan this season. I think he's going to be a whole new player from what he's been in the past, where before he was that, super aggressive. He'll hit 500 with a 540 OBP because he never walks. He's not going to hit for power. And that's kind of what he was before. I think he's got the potential to be to get into that superstar tier going into next year. The last guy here in the veteran category is Landon Hines. This is a guy who, I'm going to be honest, I didn't even know what he looked like until a couple weeks ago, just because I haven't been around that 11U squad until very recently. And I got to say, almost everything I have to say about this guy from practice is positive. I mean, he doesn't look like he'd be a very good fielder. He kind of looks a little unathletic. He looks a little slow, but he's actually pretty nasty at second base, man. I mean, it's hard to get a ground ball by him. He really does field every single thing you hit at him. If he can get to it, he's fielding it. And I mean, this guy is just a vacuum. I can't necessarily speak to his bat. I haven't seen it too much, but I've been talking to Mac and even Bernie a little bit when you've been in the cage with him. But I think he's going to have a much improved season in 2024 with the bat. And he was not bad at all in 2023. I think you look at the strikeout rate and it was a little bit high, but whose strikeout rate isn't a little bit high at 10-11U? I think you'd like to see him hit for a little bit more power than he did last year, but I think the tools are definitely there for him. Bernie, talking about Landon Hines, I'm not sure how familiar you were with this guy before 11U practices, but what have you thought about him this winter going into 2024?
Yeah, Landon had a very, underrated, I think, 2023. He put up some very good stats last year. This winter, look, I've been throwing to a lot of the 11U infielders, especially a lot more recently. And if I'm going off of just pure cage in my cage, he's got to be one of the top players on that team, just from the cage. I know sometimes we see where it takes our kids look good in the cage. And it takes a little bit of time to maybe transfer to the field. But I think it will for Landon, over a course of time. I don't know if me, immediately this season, but give it a little time. And I think that, he could be, a top 5 hitter for this 11U Floyd team. I don't think he's necessarily going to be a superstar, the best hitter, but he could be one of the top contributors to that team.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have anything negative to say about Landon Hines. Good kid, works really hard. Every time I've had any criticism of him during practice, he's always fixed it, but again, I don't really have a lot of criticisms. He always gets in front of the ball. He always looks into his glove. He always throws the ball on the line. So, I mean, I like this guy a lot. I think he's got a lot of potential, and he seems to be putting the work in. Let's go ahead and move on to our depth category. And again, we've got some really interesting names here. We've got some guys who've been in the Bears for a while. We got some newcomers. We've got some guys who I think are coming off great seasons. We've got some guys who are coming off not so great seasons. So I'm really excited to get into this kind of category here. And we're going to break these players into groups just because we're, starting to get up there in the time of the episode. So let's start with two guys who I think are both more in the veteran category. They've been in the Bears for a couple of years now. In one case, he's been in the Bears for a long time now. But these two guys, I think, both had up and down 2023 seasons. And these two guys are Garrett Perkins and Vince DiPiazza. And Bernie, I got to go to you for both these guys again. You coached both of them over the course of the season. And these are two guys who I think definitely have top team ceilings, but have bottom team floors. And I think that maybe more so with Vince than with Garrett. I think Garrett maybe is a little more safer player. Maybe he's definitely going to be best player on the second team or one of the lower level players on the top team. But I think for Vince, we saw a guy who in 2 week span could hit 700 and a guy who in a 2 week span could hit under 200, So Bernie, just give me a quick 15 to 30 seconds on these two guys and what you thought about Garrett Perkins and Vince DiPiazza in 2023. Bernie, if you're talking, I think you're muted.
That's on me. For Garrett, he was on my team the majority of 2023 summer. He put up a very productive season. He's a great base runner. He's a good defender, can pitch a little bit. So he's a very useful guy to have on a top team. And then he just absolutely dominated in the fall when he was with the second level team. He's had a very good offseason, I think, offensively. I've said before, I think toward the start of the winter, Damian came over and he was like, "Who's this kid?" And it was Garrett hitting the cage. So I think he could take a step forward, be a contributor to my 12U squad this year. And with Vinny, Vinny, like you said, he goes through these stretches, man, where he looks like a very good hitter, and then he looks like he's never played baseball before. I think sometimes that when he's going through his bad stretches, he chases a lot of off speed, and just misses fastballs. Right, I think that's Vinny's biggest problem. But I think both guys could have a very good offensive season for their respective teams.
Yeah, I agree. I think Vinny, he's always had that kind of potential where he could just light up the stat sheet. I mean, he's always been the guy that's hit a lot of doubles, but he's also a guy that strikes out a lot, And Garrett, again, I think a very useful player. I'm curious to see what kind of ceiling Garrett has. I think he's been, I think he's worked pretty hard this offseason, I have to say. I'll be honest. I've questioned Garrett's work ethic in the past, but every time I've been there, I always see Garrett working hard this offseason. I really have had no qualms with Garrett Perkins in terms of his work ethic this offseason. So I could see Garrett having a very nice season. Moving into these next two guys, these are two guys who I think definitely haven't had their chance, at least not in a long stretch with the top team, and are probably going to start on the second level team, respectively, in both their ages. But I think definitely have some potential, and I definitely have something to prove going into this year, and that is Raj Goyal and Carson Warner. KJ, I'm going to go to you for these two guys. I think both have a respectable ceiling. I think both have potential. I think, at least from what I've seen so far, I think Carson is a little bit more ahead with the glove and Raj is a little more ahead with the bat, but I could see both of them turning themselves into very solid players. Maybe not in 2024, but going forward into 2025, I think these two could definitely be kind of nipping on the heels of some of the top team players. KJ, again, 15 to 30 seconds on Raj Goyal and Carson Warner here.
Yeah, I know Raj Goyal. He's been a guy who's rose to the occasion in the past. He's gotten some shots on the top team and he's held his own every single time. I know he's a guy who's played some second base. I've seen him work in the outfield a little bit. And like you said, he's a pretty solid hitter. I think on second team he'd be pretty successful on the second team, and he has in his career. And I think spots opened up on the top team last year, and so who's to know they won't happen again for him. Is Carson Warner? He's a guy who's a great athlete. He can play outfield, he can play second, he can pitch a little bit. But again, like you said, it's been the bat. And I know recent weeks in fruit swing this last month, I think he broke his record probably 3 or 4 times. He's up over 70 miles an hour now, which is pretty solid for his age. I think if he can find a consistency with that bat, if he can get some confidence, he's such a good athlete. I think Carson Warner can be a very solid player this year.
Yeah, I agree. In both fronts, Raj, I think my biggest thing for Raj, I'd love to see him up the power a little bit. I think he's definitely got the type of swing that he could produce a little bit more, maybe not home run power, but definitely doubles power. I'd love to see him up that a little bit. And for Carson, I just think he needs to put it all together. He needs to get that athleticism and really translate it into production on the baseball field. And I think he's, yeah, give him credit. Maybe I couldn't say this necessarily in November, but I think definitely as we sit here on February, 19th or 20th or whatever, I think that Carson has really kind of stepped up his work ethic. I think it's, he's coming in on Thursday nights and ready to go on the grind and ready to, push himself to the limit. And I think his work ethic has definitely gone up and up as the offseason's gone on. And I think he could have a very solid 2024 and then turn it into a good winner and then turn it into, potentially competing for a top team spot in 2025. So I like both these guys. This next category, I didn't have a great kind of comparison for these two. So, Bernie, I'm going to send this one to you. I decided to go with the thing that ties these two players together is I think they're both kind of pitchers first. They're both, I think, very established pitchers that are looking to kind of make their impact as two-way players and show that they can hit as well. Those two guys are Lucas Perry and Nayo Guzman. I think we've seen Nayo put up good offensive numbers in the past, kind of coming off a down year with the bat. And then Lucas Perry, who we talked about a ton as a breakout pitcher last year. But if you want to be on the top team, especially with Rob, he doesn't take very many POs. I mean, you got to be able to hit. So, Bernie, when you're looking at these two guys, what is the path for Lucas Perry and Nayo Guzman to really make an impact on the top teams?
Yeah, with Niall, like you said, we've seen it before. He had a season where he played with what would currently be 15U Floyd, and he was among the top, probably 20, 25 hitters in the Bears. I think he works hard when he's here. And obviously, I think he's someone that hits for a lot more power than his size would suggest to you. I think he could have a very good year for that 16U burn team. He could be one of the top hitters this year. Lucas Perry, I think, his kind of path to get this shot on 15U Floyd is going to be through his pitching first. I think, maybe it's a shot at that team for his pitching, right? And then he gets a couple at bats, and Rob's impressed with him. I think he can definitely do it. I think he's had a great offseason. Offensively, I've seen a couple at bats in the B League. He's always batting to the top of the order. He's taking a lot of good at bats for him. So I think he'll get on the 15 Floyd team for his pitching, but then he's going to have to stick around and prove it with his bat, is how he's going to stick on that team.
Yeah, I will say with Lucas Perry, I drafted him in the B League to be basically a PO. But his at bats really impressed me. And by the end of the year, I mean, he hit 3 for the last like 4 or 5 weeks, including the championship win. He was in the 3 hole, so this guy clearly impressed me with the bat. I think he could have a very nice season. I'm not sure how high the ceiling is. I'm not sure how much power he's going to hit for, but I think he's going to be a guy whose on base percentage is near 500. I could see that type of player because he does walk a respectable amount. I think he's going to hit, close to 400. I think he'll hit like 380, so I'm pretty high on Lucas Perry going into this year. And then the final 2 players I have here in the veteran or in the depth category are the Palucci brothers, Gio and Dom. I'll go ahead and talk about these guys first, and then I want to throw it to you, KJ. I think these guys, especially for Dom, I got to be honest, I was hoping for a little bit more. He started the season with the what was 13U Floyd team. Obviously, he became 14 Floyd in the fall and was just okay. I thought he was going to have a little bit bigger of an impact. Then went to Bell, and I think kind of had a slow rise into the fall where he started to really kind of get back to vintage Dom Palucci as the season ended. But I will say at the end of the summer, he came up for like 2 weekends where we were playing GMB and hit a ball basically as far as anybody in that tournament. And I think that kind of sparked a big fall for Dom. So I think definitely the ceiling is really high for Dom. I kind of thought last year was going to be his breakout season. It wasn't quite that. But I think I still feel like he's got that breakout potential going into 2024. And then Gio, I think Gio has kind of come on a little bit quicker than his brother in terms of from when they joined the Bears to when they are top team, quality. I think Gio's come on pretty quick. He came in and instantly, kind of already knew the path because Dom had already paved it for him. And I think Gio's had some moments. For him, it's all about consistency for Gio. I think, you know, at least from my perspective, I don't want to speak for you, KJ, but I feel like we don't quite know what Gio we're going to get. I feel like I've heard myself, you, and Bernie all say Yeah, I think Gio's ready with the bat, but not quite with the glove. And also, I think Gio's ready with the glove and not quite with the bat. And I feel like we've talked about him in several different ways, where it feels like some days he looks like a great fielder, not quite a great hitter. Some days he looks like a great hitter, not quite a great fielder. And we never kind of get a consistent, complete player from Gio. And that's kind of what I'm looking for there. But KJ, give me your perspective here on the Palucci brothers going into 2024.
Yeah, I think Dom is a little bit more advanced in the power department for sure. I think, he hits the balls this winter that go far away. He's got a really good, hard, powerful swing, and I think Gio is kind of the opposite. I get on to Gio all the time for not swinging as hard as he possibly can, in what I feel like through my eyes. So I think Dom doesn't have that problem. I think Gio does take really good at bats though, and I think Dom sometimes can get overly aggressive, swing a pitch over his head, swinging curveballs. And I don't think Gio does that. And I think Gio is a little more advanced with the glove. Gio's pretty good in the infield. And Dom's not bad either. He can definitely hold his own. But here's what I know about the Palucci's. I remember last year in the weight room, Dom Palucci was known as someone who's really strong at the age. And this year, Gio Palucci beat Dom's numbers from last year. So Gio's strong as well. And I know they're both really strong and they're both hungry. They're both in every program. Here's the thing I got to see from both the Palucci brothers, and this fits for both of them. I have to see them dominate on the bottom team before, we can really say they're going to break out big. And I think all the bottom team players, they dominate first on the bottom team, then they come up and dominate the top team. We just talked about Evan Lancaster doing it. Dominate on the bottom team, he came up, and we're expecting him to dominate on the A team. Garrett Knight, dominating the B team. ZZ Garcia, Diego Buccio, they dominate on the B team. They come up and they start dominating the A team. And I think Gio Palucci and Dom, they've been good, but they've never really dominated. And I think that's the key for both of them this year. I think Dom probably does start the year on the top team. I'm not going to speak for Robbie, but, if I'm the coach, I think he's made his case, especially when there's a couple guys in high school. He's got something to prove until they come back. And if you go to bottom team, you have to dominate. And same thing for Gio. I don't know what team you're going to be on, but if you're on bottom team, you have to dominate. And I think that's the biggest thing for both of them.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Speaking a little more specifically to Dom, I think we've seen him dominate in quotation marks in the batting average department. I mean, I remember on Bell last year when he got called up in 2022, he was hitting like 600 on Bell, but it wasn't for a lot of power, and I think that's where, when you say dominate, when you talk about Garrett and Diego and ZZ and Evan, they're dominating, they're leading the team in power, and that's kind of what I want to see from Dom. Is I want to see him, honestly, I want to see him start putting some balls over the fence because he's got that kind of power. So for me, that's what I see from him. I like both these guys a lot. I mean, you never get a question the work ethic. So yeah, I'm excited for the Palucci's going into 2024, and I think it could be their best collective year yet. Our final category here is the up-and-comers. We got some prospects here. We've got some rookies, and guys, I'm excited to talk about. And let's go ahead and start with Zach Reich. He's a guy who I think has been kind of a very polarizing player in all kind of facets, kind of like I was talking about with Giovanni, and even maybe with, some of the other guys we talked about today, that some days I feel like Zach could be the next starter at second base, for example, for the top team. And some days I think that Zach does not have a future in baseball, I'm kind of joking there, but it does feel like that. Sometimes it feels like Zach goes up there and can just dominate a better pitcher. And sometimes it looks like Zach is taking the first at bat he's ever had. Sometimes Zach can make a play in the infield that it's like, holy cow, I didn't know he was capable of that. And sometimes he'll let a ball go right through his leg. So I think what you want to see from Zach is that kind of consistency. For me, I think that he's definitely the type of player I like. He swings super hard. He, dives for balls in the infield. He's not scared to put his body on the line. He is, he's definitely fast and athletic in that department. And he hits for a lot more power than his size. I mean, those are four things that I really look for in a player. And he works hard, So I think Zach could definitely be a guy that has a future with the top team. And I think he's making a case every single day to kind of get that shot. I know some of his teammates really respect his grind. I was talking to Mason Geddes the other day, and he said that if he was on BBN, he would make Zach Reich his sleeper because he feels like he's had a really good offseason. And I agree with that 100%. I think for Zach, the question is, how consistent can he be, especially with the bat, and can he be good enough on defense so that he's not hurting you? Is my questions with Zach. Moving on to the next player here, Seth Mullen. This is a guy who I think has always kind of been known as glove first, and he is super, super slick. He's here on the second base preview, but I think that's more like what he's going to play on his team. But he's a shortstop. I mean, let's call it what it is. He is a shortstop through and through. He's going to play second base for Driscoll because Jaden Coleman, is on that team, and maybe even Max Sandler, if Max is on Driscoll. So he's got some really good defenders in front of him, but he is a natural shortstop, and he is good enough to be a shortstop. KJ, I want to get your thoughts here on Seth Mullen. I know you got a chance to coach him in the B League, and I think he is glove first for sure, but what do you kind of see as the upside potential for his bat going into 2024?
Yeah, like you said, he's so good with the glove. I think it'll get us some opportunities offensively to prove himself. But you know, he needs to get stronger. Plain and simple. He doesn't have the exit velocity numbers. He needs to really be considered, a true breakout, a true big time prospect. He needs to get stronger. He needs to get a higher exit velocity. But Seth did show some big signs of hitting. I mean, in the BWL, he had a couple big time hits. He took some walks. He's a really good base runner. And he does hold his own at the plate. He's not going to be a guy who bats, under 200 by any means. He'll take walks, he'll hit some singles, but I think the power, the strength, the velo, they all got to start increasing before we're big on him. But I think, yeah, his defense, just having good at bats, his teammates really like him. He's a really good kid. He's a hard worker. It's all going to get him opportunities and keep him on the map.
Yeah, Seth Mullen still has not hit his first Bears extra base hit. And obviously he didn't play the whole fall last year. I think he joined midway through. But again, that's, obviously any top team for the Bears, extra base hits is kind of the mantra. So if you're not hitting for power, if you're not contributing in that way, it's going to be tough for you to get there. And I think 2024, Seth probably doesn't get to the top team quite yet. But I think 2025, he's so good defensively. If he can put on 25 pounds of muscle, get 3 inches taller, and add maybe 10 to 15 miles an hour on his exit velocity, I think you're talking about a guy who could be not just a starter on the top team, but potentially a star in the Bears. And then the last player here I want to talk about in the up-and-coming section is Georgie Buhazen. This is a guy who I think, kind of like Seth, is glove first, but I think there's at least an argument to be made. Maybe he's a little bit further ahead than Seth, but I think at the very worst, he's at the same level as Seth going into this offseason with the bat. But this is a guy who really does. He's not near as smooth as Seth, but man, does Georgie make every single play that you expect him to make, and he makes a lot of plays you don't expect him to make. I mean, he had to have led the BWL in diving plays. I mean, there's no way. Feels like every single week this guy was making a diving play. Bernie, when you look at a guy like Georgie Buhazen, I mean, obviously a kid that wants it really bad, and I think that's a quality that it seems like everybody would have, but not everybody wants it bad and willing to do whatever it takes. And I think Georgie has that. Bernie, what do you think about Georgie Buhazen, the 2023 season he had, and going into 2024?
Yeah, I don't know if this is, kind of my memory failing me, but I feel like when I first heard of Georgie and saw him play, I thought of him as an offensive first type player, right? He was going to make some errors in the field, but he was going to, hit the ball hard and give you some extra base hits, even with his small size. And obviously we've seen this winter that his glove's been amazing in BWL. He's made every single play, every single diving play I think he's made. And I think that, we've seen the uptick in the glove. I see no reason why we can't see it in the bat. This kid swings hard. Like you said, he wants it really bad. So I think that, with his glove being much improved, I don't see a reason why we can't see the bat do it in 2024. I think he's going to have a shot, at some point to prove that he can be 13-foot second baseman.
Yeah, and not only did Georgie not make an error in the BWL season, I think he bobbled one ball. I think every ball he fielded clean, except one that I can remember that he, again, just bobbled and then picked it up, threw the guy out anyway. So, it didn't even matter. And again, he made probably 6 or 7 diving plays that were just unbelievable. I think this guy is, definitely has all the tools, especially defensively, to be an impact player. And the question is, can he hit at that level? Like you kind of alluded to, Bernie, I think on the second level team, he was kind of that guy who had a lot of potential with the bat, but I don't think we've quite seen him do it at the top level yet. And even this BWL season, he had some moments where he hit some balls hard, but we haven't quite seen him do it yet with the production standpoint. So I think Georgie's got a lot of potential. And again, that want and that work ethic, I think, is going to take him a long way. Let's go ahead and end the show here with our sleepers and breakouts. Again, a sleeper is a player who's under the radar to the majority of the Bear population, a guy who's going to have a very solid season and maybe nobody sees it coming. A breakout is a guy who's going to go from one tier and jump 1 or 2 tiers higher. The tiers are prospect, role player, starter, star, and superstar. And let's go ahead and get right into it, starting with our sleepers. KJ, we'll start with you here. You got Andrew Engelken as your sleeper, a guy who I think has kind of been a perennial sleeper his entire career. He's had some, very solid seasons, but I don't think he's ever quite done it at a high level in the top team. What do you think about Andrew Engelken's sleeper case going into 2024?
Yeah, we've seen Andrew Engelken, be a superstar hitter. And I think Bernie kind of, made this point earlier, but it really is all mental for Andrew Engelken. I mean, he felt like the superstar and he played like the superstar. Even in the BWL, I mean, he had to be a superstar in our lineup, and he hit very well all season long off good pitching. I know his exit velo is back up. He's in the mid 90s, which is where he was at when he was dominating, and the exit velo dropped for a while when he went to the top Floyd team where he struggled really bad. But they're gonna need his pitching. He's gonna get opportunities with the bat there. He's a pretty solid defender in the infield. But his bat, I think his bat is gonna find a lot more consistency this season. I think he's gonna hit for some more power. I'm excited for Andrew Engelken.
Yeah, I agree. I second basically everything you said there. Barney, I know you had a couple guys that you were kind of debating till on that sleeper category. Did you make a decision? Who's your sleeper for the second base position?
Yeah, for my sleeper, I'm gonna go ahead and go with Landon Hines from 11U Floyd. Like I said earlier, man, this kid when he's in my cage looks like one of the best hitters on this 11U Floyd team. And I think he's in a good spot this year where I'm pretty sure I can't speak for Mac, but I think Land's gonna see the majority of and second base and the majority of the at bats. I think he's gonna have a good opportunity to contribute on a top team, which is something I look for in my sleepers and breakouts. I he's gonna have that opportunity. I think he'll take advantage of it. I think he will have, last year was kind of the underrated season. I think he takes a slight step forward in the statistics, but he is a more well-known player after the season.
Yeah, I like it. I've liked everything I've seen from Landon Hines. I'm going to go ahead and take Mason Getty's advice here, and I'm going to go with Zach Reich as my sleeper. I think this guy, I'm a sucker for the high ceiling guys, and I think Zach is exactly that. I think it's a lot easier to teach a power hitter to stop striking out and making bad decisions than it is to take a guy who can't hit for power and teach him to hit for power. And I think Zach Reich, I think if he can just lay off some of those crazy pitches that he swings at and just eliminate those just routine bonehead errors, I think this guy could be not only a top team player, but a really productive player at the top team as well. He's got a lot of power. He's got a lot of speed. And I think he's got that big playability in the infield as well. So, yeah, I like Zach Reich for 2024, and maybe he's not going to start the year with the top team, but I could definitely see him being a top team player at some point in his Bear career. Moving on to our breakouts, Bernie, I'll let you go first here. Your breakout, I think, is, me and KJ, we kind of gave you the first pick at this one, and I think either me or KJ would have taken this guy if you didn't. So give me your thoughts about Evan Lancaster as your breakout at the second base position.
Yeah, look, we've seen this guy be the best player on his team. On the top team in the past. We saw even, we could argue that, toward the back end of last fall. If I was ranking, best off seasons I think kids have had, A+ Evan Lancaster, I think he's had one of the best in the Bears. I know this is more of kind of the hitting show, but I think he's gonna be a top pitcher. And I think he's been one of the top bats. I think especially early in the year, when some of these guys like Lucas Wilbur are at high school, he's gonna bat, 1, 2, 3, or 4 in the lineup. And I think that he's gonna take that and run with it. And I think that, by the end of the summer, we're talking about Evan Lancaster being back to being a superstar, being one of the best hitters on the top team.
Yeah, again, I mean, I second everything there. I think Evan's gonna have a monster year. I think he's gonna have the case to be the best hitter on this 14 Floyd team, especially early in the season. And I think he could give Lucas Wilburn a run for his money going into the 2024 summer and fall. For me, I'm gonna go ahead and go with Dom Palucci. I think I either picked Dom as a breakout or sleeper last year, and either one, I'm gonna kind of double down here and take Dom again. I've been really encouraged, and I'll tell you what, I was kind of discouraged with Dom at the beginning part of BWL. He was facing some older pitching, and he kind of looked a little bit overmatched, and I was getting a little discouraged. But you know what? I stuck with him in the middle of the order, and by the end of the season, he really paid off. I mean, he was really, really productive down the stretch. I think he ended up hitting like 280 on the BWL season. But if you separate that first half and second half, I bet he hit 050 in the first half and hit 400 in the second half. Because he was really, really good down the stretch and he was hitting for power. Like I said, I'm looking for that power from Dom, and I get it's indoor league, so how far are those balls really going? But you'll have to take my word for it. But he was smoking some balls that would be doubles, and maybe even, kind of scratching the fence in outdoor fields. I think Dom's going to have a really productive season on both sides of the ball, and I could see him being a really good player for that 14 Floyd team. KJ, to end things here, your breakout for the 2024 second base position. Sorry, KJ, your 2024 breakout, Brady Heck, at second base. Tell me about the breakout case that Brady's going to have here in 2024.
Yeah, Brady is stronger than he's ever been in his life right now. He really devoted to the weight room this past season. He's going to be the one of the huge pitchers on that team, which is going to earn him even more at bats. But I don't think earning at bats is going to be a problem for him. He's going to be starting in the lineup. He's going to be at the top of the lineup, and he's going to play that key role. I think a lot of times last year we looked for, we said the question on here: who's going to back up Brennan and Mac? Who's going to back up Brennan and Mac? And Brady Heck is the guy who's going to start that train. He probably bats in front of him, but he's going to get on base for Brady or for Mac and Brennan. He's an on base machine. He takes really good at bats. He hits for power. He hits for contact. He's a good fielder. He played third base, which is a position he doesn't really play in the regular season because Brennan. But he played third base and didn't make an error over there. He's good all around the field. This guy's a really, really good player, and I think it's not oftentimes, we see a guy better at 18U than he was at 15U, but Brady is 3 times the player he was at 15U. He's 3 times stronger. He hits the ball 3 times harder, and I think he's going to have a huge season this coming up.
Yeah, again, I think this guy has kind of crescendoed his career into a really glorious end because this is a guy who I've always liked as kind of that sleeper player, and I think this is going to be the best version of Brady Heck we see in 2024. So I agree with that all as well. That's going to do it for this episode of BBN After Dark. Next week, of course, we'll continue with our position previews with the third base position, which is a very excited position in the Bears. We've got a lot of star power at that position and a lot of guys that are definitely worth keeping an eye on going into the 2024 season. But KJ, Bernie, thank you for joining me once again here on BBN After Dark, and we'll talk to y'all next week.